El Nino's remnants fuel the southern Hemi. I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, May 12th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Happy Mother's Day! If you enjoyed the video, be sure and give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or concerns, write it up in the comments down below. If you haven't subscribed, click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and if you'd like to make a contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the Super Thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. And with that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. The Feed, Tim Caston, Evolution Moto, Coach Nate, BB Brian Williams, and Sam. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And with that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, and we see activity. First, we see a gale producing 33-foot seas, but they're all aimed south at Antarctica, so that does nothing for us up in the northern Hemi. But we do see remnants of another gale with 32-foot seas that are sort of aimed off to the northeast. A little swell from that is radiating north. And we see the beginnings of yet another gale with somewhere in the 36 to 37-foot seas just southeast of New Zealand, pushing off to the northeast. That is definitely producing swell aimed at California and Hawaii. And there is two more swells, I think, ahead of that already in queue. So a reasonably active pattern is going on, fueled by El Nino. It's pretty typical when the summer after an El Nino winter for the area right under New Zealand, for whatever reason, it just starts firing, and this is not over the top firing, but we were in a good pattern, at least for the moment, with a series of 3 or 4 swells at least pushing off to the northeast. So surf is on the way. But before we get too far off into the future, let's just look what's right in front of our face today. We're going to start by looking at the buoys. In Northern California, we're going to use the Point Sur buoy, California, number 157. This is just sort of south of Monterey Bay. We're looking at all the energy currently hitting that buoy, anywhere from up to 33.3 second period, real long period energy, which there is none, the whole way down to 5 second period pure wind chop. But there's an obvious bump right here in the 16.7 to 18.2 second range. We'll call it 17 seconds. And with height, it looks like it's 1.6, 1.9 feet, but the real swell is all the energy from here down to about here. So you got to use some fancy math to try to figure out how much actual swell height is there. But fortunately, we'll do that for you. And primary swell, 2.7 feet at 17.1 seconds from 209 degrees. Theoretically, that makes surf at about 4.6 feet. Now, let's get real. This one reading here, as of whatever time this is, 2 o'clock this afternoon, is probably a little bit on the high side. Most are a little bit lower than that. Surf actually is, though, in the shoulder to head high range, maybe even a little bit overhead on some of the bigger sets, and it is well rideable. Let's go look at Southern California. We're picking the Point Loma South buoy off of San Diego, number 191. It's actually off of southern San Diego. Exact same profile, exact same pulse of energy, maybe a half second less because, they're a little bit further south. But when you're coming from New Zealand at about a 17-second period, the timing difference between the swell hitting, let's say, Trestles and the swell hitting somewhere in Santa Cruz, it's only about a 3 or 4 hour difference. And we'll get into that in a little bit too. But for just focusing again on what's in front of our face, swell 2.1 feet at 16.8 seconds from 209 degrees. That's surf at 3.4 feet, but of course, top breaks in Southern California that focus the swell and have swell enhancing bathymetry will do much better than that. And then there's this sort of secondary swell. It says 1.1 at 12.3 seconds, but that's pretty much just lingering energy from the main swell event. And chop height, 1 feet. That's pretty much nothing. So reasonably good, clean conditions, no other swells in the water, and one long period swell coming from under New Zealand. And then, of course, we go to the south shore of the Hawaiian Islands. We're using the Lanai buoy number 239. It is probably the most protected from any wraparound wind swell or anything. And it, too, has a little pulse, but it's more down at 13, 14 seconds. That is the exact same swell that's hitting California, just about 2 days ahead of what's happening in California, plus a little bit of wind swell. Primary swell, 2 feet at 13.6 seconds from 185 degrees. That's surf at 2.8 feet. I haven't looked, so I don't know how big it is there. I've been surfing all morning, so. But anyway, I'm sure there is quite rideable surf on the south shore of Oahu as well. All right, so where is the surf coming from that's currently hitting California and Hawaii? Well, we're going back to the 1st of May. Actually, it was, the 30th of April. A gale developed under Tasmania here with nearly 30-foot seas. In fact, 30.3-foot seas right in that little spot right there. These are the highest seas over this entire domain. We'll put this into motion now. You can see swells built to 33 feet Wednesday morning, and then again at 33 feet midday Wednesday, and down to 31.8 feet, right where that plus sign is there. So still some size, and and well, let's just go on into Wednesday night, another 30-footer, and then fading from 28 feet from there. Still continuing with something like 26 to 28-foot seas into even Friday before it all sort of fell apart. Notice everything on the east side of this area right here is all falling due south, aimed at Antarctica, doing nothing for us. But this is the swell that is fading out in Hawaii. Currently, I'd call it peaking in California. Not a particular, let's just go back and look at this for a second. I mean, it's only 33-foot seas and from a super long distance away. So, like 6,500 nautical miles. It's actually kind of amazing the swells is as big as it is. It's not huge or anything, but it's solid with long period. But if you've been in the water, there is quite a bit of a wait in between sets. That is because of the long travel distance. The previous swell we had, I think it was last week or the week before, was more up in here. So closer to Hawaii, closer to California, less distance between sets and more frequency. This further away, but a little bit higher seas and a little bit more lined up and not too bad. So anyway, let's put this into motion then, because that was not the only one. There was sort of this secondary fetch that continued into Thursday and Friday, the 3rd of May, and then a bit of a break. So the swell that's currently hitting California, it's probably going to linger around for quite a while. And then another system pushed south of Tasmania on Monday, the 6th of May, with, 35-foot seas. Now, this one, even smaller than the swell that's hitting right now. The gale is smaller, and the seas weren't as high, so the swell probably won't be even as consistent as what we're currently seeing. That pushed off to the east, but then you see yet another system developed on Wednesday, the 8th of May, so that was this week. Let's go back just one more frame. Okay, so 38-foot seas. I know it's way back here, but it's actually in at least the California swell window, not for Hawaii. Then up to 38-foot seas, continuing at 37 feet as we went into Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. And then Thursday, notice the larger area of seas and higher seas at 37 feet in the exact same place where the storm that made the swell that's currently hitting California. So this one looks to have more potential than what we're currently seeing. And then sort of traversing off and lifting better off to the northeast as we got into Friday, so just a day or so ago, and then fading from there. Now notice yet another, this is on Saturday night, another little tiny gale with 32-foot seas developed from that, lifting north with 33-foot seas, and into Sunday morning, then fading. So yet another little pulse of energy, and then notice another gale setting up under New Zealand from there. So lots of potential. Let's see if I can even count this. 1, 2, 3, 4 swells at least in the water pushing north, and the travel distance from here up to California is probably another 8 days. So the whole next part of this week is surf, and then from here another 4 or more days of surf behind that. So a good long run of surf is expected. And that's before we even start talking about what the forecast. This is Hindcast data. This is all things that have absolutely happened. Hard winds blowing on the ocean surface, creating seas, which then generate swell, which is propagating northeast. So all this is in the bag. The only question is, well, what's the local wind going to be? What are the tides going to be? Swell angle is pretty much fixed. It's all based on where the storms are located relative to your beach. We're going to get into that in a second, too. All right. But we're going to start by looking at the forecast. We're looking at jet stream level winds. These winds are up about 30,000 feet. They help support the formation of gales. And when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push into the jet to the northeast, just like what we see. No big surprise. We know there's a gale somewhere right around here. We see 130 to almost 140 knot winds pushing to the northeast. That helps create a clockwise flow, an eddy in the upper atmosphere. That also manifests itself down at the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure in the southern hemisphere. And low pressure, of course, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Those winds get traction on the ocean surface and generate seas. They impart energy to the ocean. Those seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area or propagate away, eventually get groomed out and turn into swell. And swell, when it hits your beach, of course, turns into surf. All right, so pretty good little pattern here as of Sunday. That continues as we get into Monday, the 13th of May. The trough continues but weakens as it moves to this, we'll call it the South Central Pacific, and then starting to fade on Tuesday. Much weaker wind pattern after that. And then from here, notice the winds pushing to the south. That's the opposite of a trough. It's a ridge. And what you get, this sort of split jet stream pattern, you end up with high pressure. High pressure would circulate this way in between the jet and the southern hemisphere, and that does nothing for producing surf. So you have this ridging pattern just blasting down the whole way across the Pacific. So a bit of a break in swell production, but then you get into almost a week from now, Saturday, May 18th. Look at this. Here comes another trough. And let's see what it does. It's not quite as strong as the others. In fact, it actually looks pretty weak. And the apex of it, it's not sinking south. Let's see where we go. Oh, you almost get a hint that maybe, just maybe, a week from now, another gale might form south of New Zealand. If it does, I'll take it. It would be consistent with the fading remnants of El Nino the summer after an El Nino winter. All right, so current conditions, surface level pressure, surface level winds. I wonder why there are seas and swell in the southern hemi ocean. Well, here's one gale with 50 knot winds aimed off to the northeast. Here's another gale with 50, almost 1 pixel of 55 knot winds. Let's go look to the and notice they're all pretty much aimed off to the northeast. As we get into, well, this would be 18Z Sunday. That's 11 a.m. this morning. So this system already starting to fade. But this other system lifting well off to the northeast with 50 knot winds, even into Sunday night, and 45 knot winds solid into later Sunday night, into Monday morning, and making its way across the Pacific, getting good traction. That looks great. And then finally, somewhere around Tuesday morning, it all starts falling apart. Let's continue from there. Now, we have more fetch under New Zealand, actually some energy trying to push up into the Tasman Sea. That might make some, just eyeballing this, making some background swell, maybe for Hawaii, certainly for Fiji. But notice the fetch here, all aimed to the south. Penguin storm, nothing relative to California or Hawaii. We continue into Thursday, Friday, again, more fetch, but all aimed to the south. Not good for storm production. We know there's a trough somewhere down. In fact, look at this. We do have some 45 knot winds. Not sure where the ice line is. Probably right about 65 here. So not sure whether that wind will in fact get traction on the ocean surface. We're into Saturday and now Sunday. We know there's a trough in here, but it does, we're not seeing anything on the surface charts. A little bit of something over here, but this is east of the Southern California swell window, so probably no hope there. So, as of right now, but almost look at that, maybe some backdoor fetch relative to Southern California. I'd say for now, the safe bet is there's 4 or 5 swell, between the swell that's hitting and the 3 or 4 that are already queued up, in fact, generating swell pushing north. We have a good long run of surf. After that, though, I would guess maybe a pause in the action, so you better make the most of what is coming. All right, so what's the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? We're looking at significant wave height. The highest 1/3 of raw ocean waves course, generated by fetch. We have our 32-foot seas here, but they're all aimed south. Here's the remnants of our previous gale that I think it got a, 33-foot seas. It's starting to fade, and it's relatively small, so this probably will, whatever swells generated by this will probably just get kind of lost in the background. And then here is what we think is probably the last of the series of storms with 35-foot seas as of right now, or as of 12Z Sunday, building to 30, 32, 34, 36 feet. Midday Sunday, still 36 feet Sunday afternoon. 35 feet into Sunday evening, up to 36 feet again. And in Monday morning, nice. And then pushing off to the east and fading. Now, here is our next little bit of fetch, maybe pushing something up into the Tasman Sea relative to Fiji. In fact, you can see the leading edge of something there, and maybe background cell for Hawaii, but probably nothing for California. And then going out, we're just looking for really 30-foot seas. Oh, there we go, 32-foot seas, which, yeah, you see them crashing right into the ice down in here, the ice line building north. It's starting to, it is... Peak of winter is what, like June 31st or June 30th in the southern Hemi, right? Opposite, our peak of summer in the north is their peak of winter in the south. So the ice line starting to build north, cutting off the available space for storms to get, for their winds to get fetch on the ocean surface and generate seas. So again, probably nothing from there. Continuing on, yeah, some 28-foot seas pushing off to the Southern California swell window, cuts off at about 118 or 117. And then the last frame of the model, you see that little bit of backdoor fetch pushing north, 23-foot seas. That's probably not going to survive the journey to either Hawaii or California. So pretty much the next day and a half or so is the last of our swell production. Good run of surf looking likely, but after that, things settle down. So Kenny, one of our viewers, said, show us the great circle paths. And, of course, we have a tool to do that. It's on the stormsurf.com website. You can go figure it out. It's in the wave model section. Just sort of poke your way down around here. So relative to Hawaii, this is where Kenny is. So here are the great circle paths. It's kind of hard to read, but there's the 201-degree path. There's the 188-degree path. I can't even read that one. This is the 181-degree path. So you see 1, 2... systems, and then we can put this into motion, and you can see them push up. Now, after you get it past about 181 degrees relative to Hawaii, you're probably not going to get anything. So the second part of this storm probably won't produce much swell aimed north towards the Hawaiian Islands. And here, we'll just run the whole way through this just for fun, and you see really nothing. Then here's that other channel of energy coming up through. There's Fiji right there, pretty much blocking that window. The tip of New Zealand there, cutting things off. The islands here, cutting things off. So there's this little sliver of a window with a big old, boulder sitting right in the middle of the swell window. Really chops out the sides, but swell can get up through that channel relative to Hawaii. Now let's play the same game relative to Southern California. I think this is centered on Dana Point. And here is the 213-degree path here. This is the 208-degree path, the 202-degree path. And you notice here coming under New Zealand, pretty much any storm that's going due east, energy under here is right on the path traveling up to Southern California. These great circle paths. Now remember, this is a flat map, but the Earth is a sphere. So this is the shortest distance from this location to anywhere down here. It looks like it's curved, but actually, if you printed the line on a globe, you'd see it was a straight line. If you drew a straight line from Southern California to, let's say, the southern tip of New Zealand, it would be a dead straight line. But because of, the map transformation, it looks like it's curves, okay? But with the wave model overlaid, so let's just watch this guy right here. And it kind of lifts northeast, not perfectly up the great circle path, but a bit till about there, and then it's off. So your main area for swell production is going to be right here relative to Southern California. And then here's the great circle path relative to Northern California. It's what? The distance between here and here compared to all this, not that far. Anyway, so here is our storm. And this is the other key thing. Let me see if I can pull this out. 211, where is it? Right, that's the 211-degree path. that's pretty much the window. There is Tahiti right in there in the French Polynesia here. So if you're west of 211 degrees, there aren't any islands out here blocking anything. Once you get to 211 degrees and then down to about 196 degrees, that's where you get the Tahitian island swell shadow, it's called. All the, if you go to Google Earth and start really drilling in, you'll see there's all these islands out here. They just kind of shred the swell, and they cut out the number of waves and sets and the consistency and the size and all that. The swell is fine if it's west of 211, but as soon as it gets east of 211, it takes a dramatic hit. Now, here's our storm right here that's developing. It's on the 211 degree path. Let's see what it does. It is in the 208 to 203, so in the shadow right there, and pretty much tracking east through the shadow. So not super conducive to a great swell. Probably what we're having and one of the others previous to this one that's developing are probably going to be the peak in terms of actual swell size and consistency, even though it's coming from a very long distance away. I don't know if I can actually do this. Show distance. Let's see if I can drag. Oh, there we go. Okay. Distance, nautical miles, 6,500 nautical miles. And if you're hiding back here, it's almost 7,000 nautical miles. You do the math, but that is a very long ways. All right, we lingered there a bit for a while, but that was kind of neat, kind of cool to watch, maybe a little bit educational too. All right, local wind forecast. Surface level pressure and winds, California here, there's Point Conception, San Francisco up there, down here is Southern California, Hawaiian Islands right there, high pressure, 1026 millibар high, winds circulating clockwise around high pressure in the northern hemisphere, a little bit of a gradient producing 15-knot winds off of, we'll call it Cape Mendocino here, but otherwise a light wind regime for California here on Sunday, and pretty much a light wind regime relative for Hawaii as well. No real wind swell production. As we get into Monday, though, the gradient starts firing up off of Cape Mendocino, 20 to 25 knots. That'll create some wind swell, probably mixing in with the southwestern swell. Trades build to 15, 20 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Tuesday, the gradient builds even more, 30 knots out of the north. But you get this, when you get this sort of a pattern where the high pressure is ridging in here, there's a heat low inland, you get sort of a southern eddy flow up here along the California coast, right near shore. The model shows northwest winds, but my bet is there will be some degree of light south winds from Point Conception northward up to about Point Arena, and then it all turns northwest. Light trades for the Hawaiian Islands. On Wednesday, pretty much the same deal. Eddy flow, probably, if anything, building relative to California. What is this? A cutoff local low here. We're not even looking at the northern hemisphere, but it looks like potentially something, some wind swell, at least for the Hawaiian Islands, if that low forms. But notice most of the fetch pushing off to the west. Maybe just a fragment of wind swell. Didn't look at it, but okay, Thursday. The southerly eddy flow again for California, southeast trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Friday, same pretty much deal. Maybe the eddy starts breaking down and get a light northwesterly flow, but at least we don't have nuking northwest winds. Water temperatures dropped significantly last week north of Point Conception. They were down at 49 degrees, I think it was, just off of San Francisco. And as soon as the wind stopped, the upwelling stopped, and water temperatures popped back to 54 degrees probably. It was still pretty chilly today in the ocean, but it was tolerable if you had the right wetsuit. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands. And we get into Saturday, same deal. There clearly the eddy flow is showing up on the charts with wind swell and southeast trades for the Hawaiian Islands. We get into Sunday, same deal. We're really locked into what is a pretty good pattern. Northwest wind swell for northwest breaks north of Point Conception, southern Hemi swell with eddy flow in control, and trades from the southeast for the Hawaiian Islands. All right, let's go take a look long-term, the long-term outlook. What's going on with the two major weather oscillations that affect our weather over longer stretches of time? The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the El Nino-La Nina cycle. We're going to start talking about the MJO first, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, or two flavors of it, the active phase and the inactive phase. The MJO traverses around the planet from west to east. The two phases, the active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other, they rotate from west to east around the equator. The active phase on one side of the planet, inactive phase on the other. Inactive phase of the MJO basically is downward falling air, high pressure. That does nothing for supporting storm development. High pressure pretty much steals energy from the jet stream. It splits the jet stream, makes it weaker, and does not make it conducive to forming troughs or supporting storm development. The active phase of the MJO is the one we're interested. It is like a low pressure system. It takes warm, moist air down at the ocean surface, lifts it aloft high up into the atmosphere. That warm, moist air eventually hits the upper levels of the atmosphere, colder temperatures, condenses, forms clouds and or rain. But what's more important, that warm, moist energy gets caught by the jet stream, energizes the jet stream, helps it form troughs, and feeds storm formation. So we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. Again, so the active phase of the MJO, if it's low pressure, what that effectively does is dampen trades over, if it's over the Pacific, somewhere over the Pacific, it dampens trades. The inactive phase is effectively a high pressure. The trades are driven by high pressure. So if you're enhancing high pressure, you get stronger normal trades. If you have the active phase, you're stealing energy away from high pressure and you get weaker than normal trades. So the good news is we have a series of buoys that are strung across the equator, used for monitoring El Nino, but also have wind sensors on them. The TAO Data Buoy Array, series of buoys used for monitoring El Nino. They have their wind sensors on them. This is the East Pacific. This is the West Pacific. 0, that is the equator. The international date line, right at 180 west. That's 2/3 the way across the Pacific. And we're just looking at the arrows. The longer the arrow, the stronger the wind. So moderately strong trades over the East Pacific, moderately strong trades over the Central Pacific, and then moderately strong, but maybe look like they're getting weaker over here in the West Pacific. But it's not the actual wind speed that matters as much. It is the difference from normal for this time of year. So we just look at the arrows. This is the actual wind speeds, and then you subtract the difference of what is normal for this time of year, and you see, well, just very light easterly arrows here. Lighter than, just slightly above average trades. Same thing over the Central Pacific. You get into the West Pacific, well, we even have one arrow here that's going westerly. So trades less than normal in the West Pacific, indicative of maybe the active phase of the MJO setting up over here. That would not be surprising given the number of storms that we're having in the South Pacific and the jet stream configuration. Plus, then you throw in a little bit of remnant forcing from El Nino, and you get a whole series of southern hemi swells popping out the other end. All right, what is the forecast? And we can actually see the Hindcast here too. This is 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Are the winds stronger out of the east or stronger out of the west than normal? But this is for the whole planet. All right, and we have past performance here. So notice this starts the 12th of April. Today's date, 12th of May. Here, so what we have, a whole month of Hindcast data. But this is the whole planet. So 180 west, that is the date line running right up the middle. The far West Pacific starts about 125 east, so right here. Okay. Blues are easterly anomalies, inactive phase of the MJO. So you can see in April, blues. Oh, and the part of the we call it the Kelvin wave generation area, where the active phase that the MJO needs to be positioned to feed energy into the jet stream is pretty much over the far West Pacific. So starting about here, going to about 170 west or here. Now notice, coincides almost perfectly with the production of all the storms we're seeing. West anomalies, the reds, started May 3rd or 4th and have been blowing, filling the Kelvin wave generation area of the West Pacific today, and forecast to continue into about May 20th, something like that. But notice there are a fair amount of easterly anomalies forecast starting 5 days from now, filling the entire Kelvin wave generation area. And California's at 120 west, so pretty much the entire South Pacific relative to California's swell window. Starting about 5 or 7 days from now. So the next week is probably the last of the sweet spot for storm production. Right, so that model went out a week, but we have another model that goes out 2 weeks, all right? And now this is not winds, this is outgoing long wave radiation, OLR. But remember I mentioned earlier, warm moist air gets sucked up aloft in the active phase of the MJO. It hits cold air up high, condenses and forms clouds. This is literally looking at the average cloud cover as compared to normal for the entire planet. Where the blues are, this is cloudier than normal skies. One can infer that's the active phase. And the oranges, one can infer that's the inactive phase. So today, according to this is a statistic model. It says we're dead neutral, but we know there's westerly anomalies hanging over here. Oh, in fact, that is the equator right there. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there, Australia there. The far west Pacific starts right about 125 east. There's the date line there, and there's the equator. So right now, neutral conditions. The statistic model says the active phase setting up in the Indian Ocean 5 days from now with basically neutral over the Pacific. Same deal, 10 days from now, same day, 15 days from now. The dynamic model, pretty much now they're in sync. Yesterday they weren't. Today, saying pretty much the same thing. So, again, this sort of hints that you better get what you can while you can, because there's no active phase supporting anything in the Pacific for the next 2 weeks. But let's dig deeper. This is the drill down for the exact same two models. Statistic model, dynamic model there. But what are we looking at here? Well, this is tracking where the active phase of the MJO is. Only the active. It doesn't focus on the inactive phase. Okay. And how do you read the chart? Well, the active phase moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent. That's like Bali. To the West Pacific. That's the big area where we need it to support Pacific storm production. Over the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot, if you can see it, is right there. That's where the active phase is. And if the heavy dot is inside this circle, it's considered extremely weak. Optimum situation, big heavy dot right smack here in the West Pacific. Instead, it's pretty much non-existent. 1, 2, 3 forecast tracks have it noodling around somewhere between the Indian Ocean or Africa and the maritime continents. That does nothing for us. The dynamic model, pretty much saying the same thing, having it weakly poking out in the maritime continent 2 weeks from now. Now, 2 weeks from now is a long time for a model. These things change every 6 hours, so don't count on anything too much long-term from these guys, but it is fun to look. So here's a model that goes out 40 days, upper level potential for precipitation, effectively the outgoing long wave radiation chart again. Greens are wet air, reds and oranges, dry air. South America, Central America, New Guinea there, 0 is the equator, date line roughly there. The green, wet air. So it looks like the active phase over the weak active phase over the Kelvin wave generation area today, sort of holding into about May 22nd, then starting to fade. And you see the dry air here, the yellow, starting to push into the West Pacific as we get to the end of May, pretty much into mid-June. Yeah, that's about right. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for the MJO to traverse the Pacific. Then here you get just the weakest signs of some weak wet air, a weak active phase starting to show up in the West Pacific mid-June. And here's another model. So one model, you can't hang your hat on one model. It's good to look at 2 or 3 and then sort of try to, in your mind, do an average between all of them. This is the CFS model. Same deal. This is not outgoing long wave radiation. This is east-west component of the wind, but it also has the MJO component. The dotted contour here, the inactive phase, and the blue easterly anomalies. Oh, and let's get ourselves oriented. There's your date line right there. So the main area we're interested in is the West Pacific, starting about 125 east, so right up there to about 170 west, right there. Now, this is all past performance with the fading part of El Nino in March. Here's another active phase that happened with westerly anomalies in the mid to late part of March. Inactive phase and a bunch of easterly anomalies, and there's a second sort of lobe of inactive phase into Here we go, starting about May 5th, right when the storm track started waking up. And there's our westerly anomalies, supposed to go for about another week to maybe 6 or 7 days. And then look at this, easterly anomalies take over with a weak hint of just a hint of the inactive phase of the MJO setting up. So this is probably our last big hurrah for a couple of weeks. That doesn't mean there won't be swell and there won't be storms in the southern Hemi, but it probably won't be as prolific as it is now. And then finally, one model going out 3 months. Past performance is down here. The forecast is here. Oranges and reds, this is 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies again, or I think that's what it is, yes. And the oranges and reds are westerly anomalies, so loosely you could say here was, and date line right there, okay, same deal, West Pacific there. So here was an active phase of the MJO back in February, here was another one back in March. Inactive phase with blues, easterly anomalies. Here's our current active phase. You notice they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And then you also notice easterly anomalies, just like today or tomorrow, forecast setting up just somewhere in between Hawaii and California, but notice them building stronger and stronger and stronger as we get into August. And there's the date line right up there, moving from the date line and starting to encroach even on the West Pacific. As westerly anomalies in the sweet zone, the Kelvin wave generation area, whatever's left of them, backtracking and really becoming focused, that right there is over Bali, the maritime continent. And so this is the hallmark signal of a building La Nina when you have a bunch of easterly anomalies setting up long-term in the Pacific. But rather than listen to me, let's overlay the MJO. You can see the pattern, active phase, weaker, and you notice they're all traversing back to the west, focusing more on the West Pacific. And then we overlay the low pass filter right here. So this is the El Nino La Nina signal, the solid contour low pressure bias. During El Nino, well, in this case we had 1, 2, 3, there was actually a fourth contour here. Low pressure was focused right over the date line. That feeds the jet stream, that makes all the storms happen, and you see we have maybe a week of low pressure left. I mean, right now it's effectively gone. The dotted contour here, again, this is over the Pacific, is high pressure. High pressure building started a week ago, last Sunday, even a little bit before that. Continuing to build in coverage. California's at 120 west, so filling the area from California almost through the entire Kelvin wave generation area. No wonder you have easterly anomalies. This is your La Nina signal, and notice the low pressure bias that was over the date line setting up over the maritime continent, if not Indian Ocean. So another question was asked is, well, what's all this mean relative to Europe? Because we have viewers from Europe, and they want to know, well, what's it mean when El Nino is in the Pacific and you have a low pressure bias in the Pacific? Wherever the low pressure bias is, that's where all the storms, or the majority of storms, are going to focus. So this past year was El Nino. The focus was on the Pacific. But when you move into a La Nina pattern, then the focus becomes, of course, the Indian Ocean and also the Atlantic. Certainly the South Atlantic during the Northern Hemisphere summer months, but in the winter months, this also means Europe. Big storms pushing into the British Isles, Ireland, swells pushing down into Portugal. You kind of know the drill. So we're going from a pattern that favored the Pacific to now a pattern that will favor the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. But that probably won't really set up in earnest until we get, well, the hurricane season for the Atlantic relative to the U.S. West Coast. With all these easterly anomalies, I would begin to really get a bit concerned about the Atlantic storm corridor as we get into August timeframe. And then right around that, sometime September, October, the North Atlantic will probably wake up. Now, the question is, what about the Indian Ocean and surf potential in the Indian Ocean for this time frame right in here? We're in a transition state right now, and you're going to see that real plainly in a couple of charts we're going to show here. Transition states are always hard to judge. right now we have the hangover from El Nino still forcing the Pacific, and that sort of means the hangover from El Nino is not forcing the Indian Ocean, which means the Indian Ocean is probably not, gonna really do a whole lot for a good part of the summer. The latter part of the summer, it could wake up, but I think the focus is really going to be the Atlantic as we get into, August and beyond. So now we're moving into the ENSO part of the discussion, the La Nina part of the discussion. All right, we're starting by looking at subsurface temperatures in the Pacific. East Pacific here, West Pacific here. These little X things here, these are the anchor lines on the buoys strung across the equator used for measuring El Nino. The sensors collect data, use a model, or collect subsurface temperature data, use a model to fill in the gaps, and you get a profile where the warm water and the cold water is. Why does that make a difference? Well, if you're in El Nino, most warm water or the bulkier warm water starts building up in the East Pacific. If you're in La Nina, the bulkier warm water is in the West Pacific. Why is that? Well, during La Nina, trades are stronger than normal. Blowing over here is east to west, so they literally scrape all the warm water here. You get upwelling off of Ecuador and Peru, and all the warm water gets deposited in the far West Pacific, south of the Philippines, in that area. All right? So, the 30-degree isotherm, centigrade, 30 degrees centigrade, very warm water. You see it clear as day here in the far West Pacific. 29-degree isotherm, same deal. It's, if anything, these have built a little bit here. The 28-degree isotherm, though, backtracking. I think it was over at 140 or 145 a week or two ago. Now it's at 152, and it's sliding this way. And the 24-degree isotherm, getting shallower at, what is that, maybe 24 meters deep here in the East Pacific, but you see it's 150 meters deep in the West Pacific. All it means, trades are blowing, scraping warm water, creating upwelling here and scraping the warm water, pushing it off to the west. But we don't have to guess about that. We have the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. We have sensors going the whole way down 300 meters, 1,000 feet deep in the ocean, okay? Colder than normal temperatures right here. Classic La Nina developing sort of pattern. A little thin area of 1-2 degree above normal centigrade temperatures here. That's just warm water baking the ocean surface, but much cold water at depth. Also, more than likely erupting to the surface. I don't think this is quite capturing it all. And then you got your building, not very much, 1 degree above normal, building warm pattern here in the West Pacific. We have another version of that chart, but this also incorporates some satellite data with it that sort of gives you a little bit more fidelity. And look at this. You see the cold water upwelling from Ecuador the whole way out to 140. That's 140 west. That's about right there. Hawaii is about 155, somewhere over here. So you see cold water along Ecuador, stronger than normal trades. Basically, it's a cold water Kelvin wave erupting here. The last of El Nino's warm waters getting pushed off to the west. The building La Nina warm pool, pretty clear here, developing in the West Pacific. Sea level anomaly data. This is, you take a satellite, you measure the height of the sphere of the ocean. Is it higher or lower than normal? That is, get rid of the wind waves, get rid of the swell, get rid of the tides. Is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? Well, if you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts, you'll end up with a bit of a divot on the ocean surface. That, in combination with stronger than normal trades, they're scraping water, pushing it over to the West Pacific. So the East Pacific actually will be lower than the West Pacific, will be higher, and it's the trade winds constantly blowing from east to west. Maybe that's the better direction from the camera side of the, either way. And so you can see that here. This is the equator right here. That is the date line here. That's the Galapagos Island right there. Ecuador's there. Peru's down here. You see minus 10 centimeter, minus 15 centimeters. All this is saying is the inference is colder than normal water developing from Mexico the whole way down to Chile and out on the equator almost out to the date line. And finally, upper ocean heat anomalies. You can literally see the temperature pattern changing from May, warm water in the West Pacific, or May of last year. This is the development of our last winter's El Nino Kelvin waves. Warm water pushed from west to east, driven by active phases of the MJO and westerly anomalies. The buildup of warm water off of Ecuador and Peru, and peaking in the October, November time frame. You can literally see the Kelvin waves pushing across. Now, with the westerly anomalies gone, the warm water disappears. It migrates on the surface back to the west. Cold water, which at the peak of El Nino started developing here in the West Pacific, now it is making its transit across the Pacific. You can see it all build up here off of Ecuador, the beginnings of La Nina. Surface temperature analysis, sea surface temperature anomalies. All right, so you can see it pretty clear here. Let's start with South America here, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, the Galapagos right here, Central America, Hawaii out here, California, you get it. The hangover, we're in the transition state. The hangover warm waters from El Nino here on the equator, but running right through the heart of it, a developing cold pool, that cold water that's up at depth, erupting, upwelling off of Ecuador and the Galapagos, getting caught by the trades, pushed off to the east. This cold water, now when you have warm water over here, again, warm water creates evaporation, it rises up into the atmosphere, that hits the jet stream, changes the jet stream pattern, okay, and favors the jet stream to dip south into California during El Nino winters, which creates rain and surf and all that good stuff. But then when you get this cold upwelling water, and as the warm water from El Nino starts dissipating, you're going to get no evaporation. If anything, you're going to get falling air, and then you're going to get high pressure just locked solid over the East Pacific. So one would expect a drier pattern and less storms as you get into the winter months. The warm water moves to the West Pacific, and if not the Indian Ocean, and then favors the pattern that we talked about before, favoring the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic. Sea surface temperature trend just for the past 7 days, but you can see it plain as day. South America there, Central America, colder than normal temperatures off of Ecuador, off of Galapagos. You can actually see hints and pieces of it the whole way out to almost the date line. You don't see any significant warm water buildup, and it's just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's all that matters. What's going on up here doesn't really impact the jet stream. Don't know why, but that's just the way it is. So colder than normal waters here. Again, the beginnings of La Nina. And then the overview pattern, again, the beginnings of La Nina here, the fading remnants of El Nino here, the buildup of warm water here in the Indian Ocean and the far West Pacific. And also notice here, again, we've talked about this every week, lots of warm water in the main development region for hurricanes relative to the Atlantic. That's nothing but throwing gas on the fire, assuming you get a good, healthy push of tropical waves off of Africa. This would be the start of a active hurricane season. The Nino 1.2 index. This is right there by the Galapagos and Ecuador. Sea surface temperatures. Neutral is right there. This is over time, so we're back into January of this year. You see steadily falling temperatures. We're negative today. What are we down at? Minus 3/4 of a degree, 788 thousandths of a degree below normal. But this is not the official El Nino monitoring region. This is the Nino 3.4 region. This is the area on the equator south of California out to almost the date line. And today, the last probably reading of above normal temperatures, plus 0.025, 25 thousandths of a degree above normal. All right. So we are painfully close to being just neutral, not La Nina, but just dead neutral. And you saw back in the, can I find it back here? There you go. You see, there's still warm water. This is just 5 degrees north and south of the equator, but the growing area of cool water here is right at the point of overtaking the warm water, so we end up with a neutral index. In fact, let's go look. This data is a little bit biased on the low side. Let's go look at one other index real quick. This is the official weekly OISST5 data. This is for the Nino 1.2 region, Nino 3, Nino 3.4, Nino 4. This is the official El Nino monitoring region, week by week by week. For the week of May 1st, we were half a degree above normal. And you can see the trend just going back here. It was up, 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 up. We were up at 2 degrees, and I think we had one at 2.1 degrees above normal. So this, again, is the indicator that the El Nino pattern is fading in the Pacific. All right, so finally, what does the atmosphere think is going on? The good news is there have been people that have been measuring the barometric pressure in Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti for, I think, almost 200 years or 150 years, some ridiculous amount of time, okay? But what that does is, again, if pressure is lower over Darwin, Australia, that typically, on average, means La Nina. If pressure is lower in Tahiti, which is in the Pacific, then that means El Nino. So, if you take the difference in pressure between the two, you get an index. Right now, it says pressure is lower. This is the Southern Oscillation Index, they call it. Lower, minus 10.63 in Tahiti, all right? Now, that sort of is contrary to what one would say. Well, if you're going from El Nino to La Nina, shouldn't the pressure be rising? And it should. But, I mean, on a daily basis, you have low-pressure areas moving around, high-pressure areas, so it's all very noisy. Just for fun, though, let's go back. We're just looking here a month ago and just look at the numbers. Yeah, negative, positive, all jumps around, and the MJO significantly influence these numbers. Now, remember, we think we're in the active phase of the MJO, so it's no surprise that the numbers are going down a little bit. Now let's go, so we'll take the 30-day average here, and that sort of takes some of the noise out. It averages out the extremes. Minus 2.58, okay, and where were we? Oh, look at this. We were a bit more negative a month ago. I mean, again, still, I've talked about this before. During this past El Nino, this index did not do well. It should have been way more negative than it was. So it's kind of hard to tell what's really going on here. And then the 90-day average. This really averages things out. This is your El Nino La Nina indicator. So minus 2.48. So just barely. If you're negative, you're El Nino-ish or active phase of the MJO. Where were we a month ago? Yeah, you can see minus 5, minus 7, minus 8. So the trend is getting closer to zero. So sea surface temperatures in Anomaly in the Nino 3.4 region, pretty much dead even. You can see the pressure data here sort of saying nearly dead even. We saw the forecast suggest low pressure fading in the Pacific, high pressure building in the Pacific, low pressure moving to the Indian Ocean. Everything clearly is indicating we're moving to some sort of a La Nina pattern, but how big and how strong? So the final slide in tonight's presentation is the sea surface temperature forecast in the Nino 3.4 region from the CFS version 2 model. Now, there are like 30 different models that forecast this, but this is the one that updates daily and is easily accessible. So we use it sort of just as a, sort of lick your thumb, stick it up in the air, feel which way the wind's blowing sort of guide. So clearly, this model's saying we're moving into La Nina. This is neutral territory. This is the actuals. We were up at 2 degrees above normal back in December. The final data point here is, maybe 0.2 of a degree above normal. The forecast, the dashed line says somewhere here in mid to late May, we're going to go over the zero threshold, and then we start going down, down, down. Now, the good news is this model was saying somewhere minus 2 or minus 2.5. Latest versions saying minus 1.5 degrees below normal. And this model, or this checked version of the model, is still a bit rogue. The PDF corrected, probably a little bit closer, says temperatures going down to maybe 1.3 or 1.25 degrees. I'm really interested in seeing what the consensus model says. That's still about another week to week and a half out from being updated. That goes and takes all 30 of the models and gives us a sort of a rough idea of where we're going. Though last time we looked at it last month, it was all indicating La Nina. The question is, how strong of a La Nina? Well, we're in the spring unpredictability barrier. You guys have all heard this before. That means that it's hard for any of the models to really know what's going on in the transition period during spring, somewhere between, late March and late May. So once we get out of May into June, the models will probably have a much better grip on things. That said, we haven't seen anything so far that suggests we're just going to plunge into some super deep, dark, deep La Nina. Rather, maybe more of a moderate to moderate plus La Nina. But again, I don't take any of it with too much seriousness at this early point in time. But when we get into June and get out of the spring unpredictability barrier, we'll have a much better idea where we're going, though it all clearly suggests La Nina. So let's summarize where we're at right now. The good news is Jetstream looking good, active phase of the MJO forcing the Jetstream, which in turn is creating troughs in the area under New Zealand, which is pretty typical for the summer after an El Nino winter. And sure enough, we're having a whole series of New Zealand storms forming, which have created seas, which have created swells, which are propagating. The first of which has passed Hawaii and is also pretty much peaking in California. Going to hang on for another couple of days in California, and then 2, 3, maybe 4 more swells behind that. So probably the better part of 10 to 12 to 14 days of surf, all pretty much guaranteed. The swells are in the water. They're moving with their way north. It's just waiting for it to happen now, meaning you should plan your time accordingly. Your work schedule, your family schedule, whatever you need to do. After that, looks like we move into the inactive phase of the MJO, and with a building La Nina pattern, it seems like it's going to be less and less and less prolific. That does not mean that there won't be surf, but it probably won't be consistent as what is coming, so make the most of this. Then you can start looking out much deeper into next fall, next winter. Hangovers from El Nino continue in the jet stream, even when the surface conditions have changed for 3 to 4 months. So we're thinking that even as we get into fall, there will still be a tendency towards El Nino, and maybe even into the winter, not so much from a surf perspective, but from the backdoor trough perspective. And what that means relative to California is backdoor troughs pushing down from the Pacific Northwest, which drags moisture and a lot of cold air, which is good for snow production, which is good for the water table. We could eke out potentially, if we get even close to normal for a third year in a row, that would be really good, because with coming La Nina, we know we're going to be into 2 or 3 years of less than normal water and less than normal snow. So fingers crossed on that. But for right now, there is surf coming our way. Make the most of it. If you enjoyed our video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a question or a comment, write it up. We're happy to respond in the comments section below. And if you'd like to make a donation, you can. Use the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. And with that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.